Hello, I'm Jay Hirsch, Director of Administration of Columbia's ERM program. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event, Geopolitical Risk to Nations and Role of Technological Superiority. Throughout the event, you can post any questions you have using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the event. Next slide, please. I'd like to tell you about some of our upcoming events. On Fridays and Saturdays, we have our 5 ERM seminars. You can get more information about them on the ERM website under the events link. On select Thursdays, we have our Exploring the Power of Mindfulness seminars. This Saturday, October 28th, we have an on-campus event, How to Take Your Career to the Next Level. And on November 29th is our CRO Spotlight featuring Edward Fishwick of BlackRock. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Dr. Ondrej Krehel. Ondrej?
Thank you, Jay. Truly privileged to be here among all of you distinguished audience tonight. I am a lecturer at the Enterprise Risk Management program at the Columbia University. My background includes breaking crypto codes, working on digital forensic matters, address high risk in finance and technology. I truly feel privileged that over many years, I built a trust among international community delivering various services through my engagements. I also enjoy math, and I cover most of the artificial intelligence algorithms, especially claim himing, in making decisions. Hill climbing is one of the prevalent algorithms that is being used today. I would like to welcome in my quest for wisdom, which it's never enough when you are a scholar at such a prestigious university. And I would be joined today by great wisdom from John Frenchie, who is a former CIA officer and a distinguished enterprise risk management professional, as well as with Leo Taddeo, who is a former FBI special agent in charge. There are almost 400 agents reported to, and currently is a CEO of Epgate. The geopolitical atmosphere is considered a driving factor in innovations, including technology, and it truly pushes the limit of societies into more resilient formation and explores the risk and impact into steps into humankind future. Well, at least one scholar could argue that geopolitical tractions invented the steam engine and perhaps created electricity that we are using today, and also exploration of the universe. It does shape the geopolitical risk itself, what nations have accomplished and embraced through competing in geopolitical interest. Many enterprises flourish through technology, and the understanding how the enterprise risk and how technology plays role in geopolitics, which we all could agree is greatly interconnected today and visible, will be explored in today's sessions. Also, my personal story was connected to geopolitical tractions between East and West, where I experienced a risk of a former Eastern regime and how well the free markets demonstrated itself through the geopolitical regimes. Personally, I like to explore and transforming myself in knowledge and views, and as you can see, I was never shy to ask for help. So I'm honored and privileged to have such a distinguished panel today. And our point here is to discuss and embrace different views. It's not about being right or wrong, what we think about geopolitical risk, neither form strong opinions. It's truly embrace the exploration and what we know today from the past and the belief for the future of geopolitical risk. With that, I would like to open a panel and start with Leo. How should one perceive and understand geopolitical risk, especially when we speak to executives?
Thanks, Ondrej. It's great to be here. Great to be part of the panel. Important topic. Let me start with my perspective. So my background, I'm a native New Yorker. I studied in New York. I studied physics at Rensselaer. I was a Marine officer for a number of years, so I served in the U.S. military. I left the Marine Corps, went to law school, didn't particularly want to be in the legal field, so I became an FBI agent. And I spent most of my professional life as an FBI agent. In the later part of my career, I was the special agent in charge of cybersecurity, cyber investigations, and special operations for the New York office. That's the largest cyber division within the FBI. I left the FBI in 2015, went into commercial life, and through a number of roles, security roles, and various business roles, I am presently serving as the Chief Executive Officer of Appgate, a global company. We are a public company providing cybersecurity solutions to major enterprises and government agencies. So that's my perspective, and I'll jump into answering your question. First, it's important to think about what we mean by geopolitical risk, and really to define risk in general. So I spent my career as a risk mitigation professional in various ways. And in my professional life, there are very specific frameworks around managing risk and defining risk. So I think it's helpful for the audience to first have a common understanding of what we mean by risk. And so in common parlance, risk is the threat of an event or a condition, the likelihood of that threat or condition occurring, and the impact of that condition occurring on either an operation or an individual or an enterprise. And so the traditional formula is the threat times the likelihood times the impact equals risk. So we can break that down in a number of ways. So let's talk about just continuing to level set on what we are using as definitions, what we mean by geopolitical risk. So geopolitical risk, in my mind, from an enterprise point of view, are the conditions around the globe outside the domestic political environment that can threaten and have a negative impact on some interest of my company. And so that could be take the form of political unrest, military instability, resource scarcity, or tensions between countries that limit my ability to do business around the globe. And so with that set of definitions, I think we can start a meaningful conversation about how technology impacts those risks and how professionals can work to minimize those risks.
Thank you. And John, I would like to kindly ask you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then please kindly dive into the question how one should perceive and understand the geopolitical risk, especially from a role that you handle in the past, and like how we should really perceive to speaking executives about a geopolitical risk.
Thank you, Ondrej, and thanks for having me on this panel. It's my background. I joined the agency. I was at CIA in operations for 29 years, and the majority of my career was spent in the Middle East. So risk was kind of part and parcel of everything that we did, and it developed along different pathways during different times. Which I think is, in addition to what Leo is saying, is something that's really important to be able to track and follow the trends of risk, because they have a cycle, they go and they're affected by different things that happen at different times. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that these days, especially in the world. But what the two things I would add to what Leo's saying, because what I'm doing right now, after I left the agency, I started my own company. I'm consulting. I'm working with high net worth individuals. I'm working with companies. I'm working with NGOs. on these issues, on geopolitical risk, how it affects them, how do they integrate, how do they deal with technology, how do they embrace it, how do they make it mitigate risk, and how does it increase risk for them? And one of the biggest things that I'm seeing from their standpoint is disruptions, that how technology is disrupting their world and how it's affecting what it is they do and how they do it. And this is positive and it's negative. In some ways, it really enhances what they're doing. Sometimes it doesn't. But the one thing it's doing as well is it's increasing the level of uncertainty, and that increases the level of risks. So as you start looking geopolitically now more than any time in the world, the things that are happening abroad are affecting us here in the United States, and the things that are happening here in the United States are affecting us abroad. That has been going on. I'm sure people have been talking about that for decades now, but more so, it's become much more transparent and seamless in a way. So it's not even the time differences that matter that much. So I think as we move forward on this and we start to embrace this and talk about this issue of technology, I think we have to take those kind of things into account. So.
Yeah, thank you. I've been talking to recently many of the professionals, especially in investment area, who are looking into investment, let's say overseas, and how they perform due diligence and M&As in different markets. And from history, we kind of learn what we've seen, let's say, between European markets, American markets, Asian markets, and heavy focus is, for example, right now on African continent, where the technology would play, we believe, in significant role in digital transformation. And of course, geopolitical risk is one of the areas that comes right with the investment. How should we properly invest in this region, and what should be done? So my next question would be, what is meaning of that geopolitical risk and its manifestation to enterprises? How should enterprises really think about it? And I'll start with you, please, Leo.
When I was still at the Bureau and in my early post-Bureau career, where I was providing consultation to enterprises, people would ask, well, how should I think about geopolitical risk? And I would say, if you want to understand the cyber risk from a geopolitical point of view, just read the front page of the New York Times. The front page will tell you who's coming after you. So, for example, if you see U.S.-China relations and tensions escalating, you will probably see more cyber activity. Not that there was any reason for it to go down in the first place, but tensions between countries generate risk. And so, for example, if you were in the technology fields in the U.S. And you would read the New York Times or any other publication, the adversary was basically telling you what they were after. So, for example, the People's Republic of China would publish reports saying what their 5-year economic forecast was and what technologies they were interested in. Well, as a cybersecurity professional, you could look at that list and say, well, I have some of that, which means they're coming after me. So if it was medical technology and I was a pharmaceutical company, well, I now know who's coming after my IP, my intellectual property. If I were an AI company or advanced computing company, I would know that those are technologies that my adversaries are after, and as a result, my IP is at risk. And so it's not hard to find the source of the risk. It is hard to protect against the different types of threats that are out there, whether they're cyber threats or other types of threats. So great question about how we should think about geopolitical risk from an enterprise point of view. If a company wants to get an understanding of what's out there and what threats are out there, they're usually very well reported and open source.
Great. So Austin would be probably one of the sources where you would go and find quite a bit of information why someone would be, let's say, interesting into exploiting vulnerabilities of some of the enterprises.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of mystery around what our adversaries, and I speak from a U.S. perspective. So when I say U.S. adversaries, I mean it in the parlance of what our government considers to be adversarial economies, adversarial nations, and sometimes they're friendly, sometimes they're not. But what I consider to be adversarial actions are the theft of intellectual property, the theft of financial resources, cyber attacks like we saw with Sony Entertainment back in 2013 and 14, those disruptive attacks from countries like North Korea. So geopolitical risk, in my most of my career has been centered around trying to see over the horizon as to which adversaries were going after which potential targets here in the United States. But I found that, and when I left the law enforcement intelligence community, it wasn't hard to keep pace with what was happening, because most of the adversarial activity and adversarial intentions can be found in open source reporting. Like I said, the harder part is figuring out specifically what the threats are and how to mitigate them.
And John, what is, like, for you, the meaning of geopolitical risk, like, let's say, from an intelligence type of mindset, and how that manifests to enterprises? I know you have quite a bit of experience, for example, connection of intelligence to physical security of the enterprises as well, and technology.
I think, building on what Leo was saying, I think part of the problem here is that most of us don't view ourselves as victims or as being interesting enough for somebody to care about. Now, if you're a Boeing and if you're a Lockheed, or if you're a a Verizon or a big company, Apple or Microsoft, sure. I mean, that makes sense because these are the big boys. But if you are just your individual, you have your own company, or you're a smaller firm, you're like, oh, who cares about me? They're not going to really care. I don't really play in that space. And what I think what's happened over the recent years is that has been turned on its head. And these nation states and cyber criminals and a lot have started focusing more on individuals. I mean, recently we've seen that there's been mapping of individual IPs around the United States for nation states to understand how our networks work and whatnot. There's on the infrastructure, critical infrastructure is another place where little, water desal plants in Florida, or reservoirs here or there, which really don't have the infrastructure in place. We've always thought, who cares about this little town in the middle of nowhere, have come on the map of these folks. And so there's got to be this realization that we all are susceptible in one form or another. We all have things that enemies, and again, it just doesn't have to be foreign enemies, it also can be domestic enemies and criminals, want to look at when it comes to, with regard to us. And then compounding that, and you talked a little bit about Africa, Ondrej. And I wanted to get back to that because I think that's an important place for us to talk about, because that's a burgeoning market where there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward. Is how do I deal in these kind of places? How do I expand my markets into places where I'm really not certain about, and I don't understand what the risks are. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand how they do business, right? That's a really big, and a lot of times companies will just avoid it because they're like, you know what? I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to, it's too complicated, or we've got enough market in the United States or Canada, Mexico, like places that we're fairly familiar with. So what I would say to people like that is, it's not just the technology that you can leverage. I mean, at everyone's fingertips now, you can go online through OSINT and be able to collect data and background on so many different things. The real information that you need to understand, though, is oftentimes through human channels. And I think a lot of times people rely just solely on technology to be able to get answers to what it is that they want, whereas they're either not comfortable doing it, they don't know where to turn to be able to use that, because the real understanding, the real access to get the answers that they need are through human relationships and through contacts through that. And so being able to leverage, I mean, Colombia is a fantastic place where you're going to meet people from all over the world, and you're going to have interactions with people in the world, and that networking will open up all of those kind of places for you so that you can understand those places better. And if you don't understand it, then you leverage those contacts and those friends to be able to gain access to it. I mean, I always tell people that I meet, my contacts are your contacts and your contacts are mine, hopefully, right? Hopefully they'll play. But that becomes really key as you start trying to navigate this geopolitical risk calculus, because it's not black and white. It's not A or B. You'll go to different portals and they'll give you numerical ratings on how risky something is, or whatever. Or you'll read something going on in the world and you'll think, oh my God, it's got to be the most dangerous place in the planet. I've served throughout the Middle East. I've served throughout Africa and Europe. And the places that you would think were the least safe were the most dangerous. And the ones that you think that would be the most dangerous were the most safe. As long as you had the right information and you knew what to do to go in there, and you could actually find really receptive people that wanted to do business with you and that understood how it worked, and they, and moving forward. So I think there's a lot of misunderstandings on these things too, where we tend to rely. I mean, technology is great, and we can really leverage it to give us a step up. But at the same time, you have to complement that with the human piece of how things work, and not just disregard it, because that's really where you're going to find out the true answers and be able to make your decisions.
We often talk about, Leo, like about a technology and a role that it is believed the technology help us mitigate exactly what John pointed out, right? The human, like a human versus SIG type of the operations. And we have this perception is that, like, even like right now with AI, deep learning, machine learning, hill climbing, we're going to make all these decisions. AI is going to drive this effort. How would you truly see today, from your point of view? I mean, you're running one of the top product in Zero Trust. How did really technology play that role in mitigation? Are we like really successful doing something meaningful, like a mitigate a risk to technology, like geopolitical risk?
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about what technology would provide. So technology, first of all, as a nation state, provides us the resources to mitigate risk. So the more technology provides a strong economy, the more resources we have to produce a stronger military, stronger intelligence community, a stronger diplomatic effort around the world. So technology makes us wealthy, makes other countries wealthy. And if you have resources, you can mitigate risk better. That's pretty clear. Technology is also a tool to mitigate risk. So technology on the one hand can produce resources that gives you the ability to find many tools, diplomacy being one, but technology is a tool in and of itself. So let's take, for example, cyber offensive capabilities. Cyber offensive capabilities can help us collect intelligence that allow us to see over the horizon, gives us situational awareness, gives us the ability to have an early warning system, if you will, if we can enter systems that perhaps don't want us to be in them. And so technology can be used to mitigate risk as an offensive capability. Let's take cybersecurity as a defensive capability. If I have advanced technology that allows me to defend my systems, I can now deny an adversary the ability to get in my decision process. And if I can deny the adversary the ability to see inside my systems, I mitigate a form of risk. And so those are two types of risks, two types of ways to use technology as a tool. But there's so much to talk about here in terms of what the different types of technologies are. I mean, we could use technology, for example, medical technologies to mitigate the next pandemic. I mean, that is a huge risk around the world. We can use technologies to advance our ability to operate in space and improve communications, or even create content like entertainment. And those are things that can enhance our standing in the world as a global partner. So it is enormously important for a country and a society to develop its technical advantage. It is enormously important for wealth building. It's enormously important for security. And I think we're pretty good at it. So it's great to be part of this ecosystem. I'm an advocate of using technology, but I also am a real supporter of John's point in that you can't rely on technology too much. One good human source can beat all of the collections capabilities of the entire US government. So you just have to be able to balance and understand where to use which tool, and hopefully you have the right tool at the right time when you need it.
You touch on a great point, and that's there is always conversion of this human intelligence and signal intelligence. That how would you do it? And I saw a great manifestation, for example, in AI that would measure actually our engagement interaction of through our facial expression when we're doing these presentations, like how really engaged we are and we believe to our own story that we share. So that I found that truly inspiring, like how to create authenticity and integrity in, for example, in webcasts. John, from your point of view, how would you touch on the collection of the intelligence, right? So it's a little bit different. Now you're getting into this exploration where you truly interact with, let's say, due diligence entities overseas, right? And you truly try to understand geopolitical attractions and that enterprises that bring actually fit in those geopolitical situations. So can you maybe just a little bit explain like what kind of intelligence gathering actually helps with that risk mitigation?
Yeah. Well, first I want to thank Leo for doing for the props on CIA there. So it's not often you get the FBI and a CIA person on the same panel and they agree. So I know it'd probably be more interesting for everybody watching this if we would like fight a little bit more. But so thank you for that. But so to your point, Andre, there were a couple of examples. I just want to touch on one thing that came up. I was thinking of as Leo was talking, and the importance of technology and how that helps mitigate a lot of risks. One of the things it also allows you to do is to direct and channel resources. And I think right now, especially, companies are really facing a hard time, and budgets aren't as open as they once been. Very uncertain economy moving forward. How do I pick and choose where I spend money? And where do I throw that? And using the technology to help you define what is important. And that's what I do a lot with clients too, when they're looking at security and risk and talking to them about, okay, let's look at what you're facing. Let's look at where you are and what you need to really focus your energies on, and the specific resources you have, because they don't want to. I mean, look, you could throw a lot of money at a lot of problems and get a lot of answers that would be great to have, but you don't really need. So being able to leverage technology to help you triage in a way, almost like in a hospital, triaging it down to what do you actually need, is one really strong way that then you can leverage in their human sources, and you can and folks on the ground that can really provide you with the insights that you need, in a very, very specific way, because you can find out what's available out there and what you need to have. But on top of all this, and it's very, very key, no matter whether you're dealing with humans or whether you're dealing with technology, is trust. Can I trust what I'm learning? Can I trust the information that's there? I think we've seen this, the misinformation, disinformation that's out there, from different sources, and they put it out there for different reasons. And it's something we're challenged with, I think, not only on a geopolitical way, but on a day-to-day way, with how it is we lead our lives. Is the information that out there, can I trust it? Is that email that I got from someone from Norton's antivirus saying my subscription is up, is that a real one, or is that something false? There's a lot of these things out here that I think we have to be very mindful of and be very discerning for. But when you start to move forward, especially internationally, and you're dealing with groups, it's really important to have someone you trust to help vet who you're talking to, because there's a lot of people offering a lot of services out there that may or may not have the relationships that you need. And so understanding and having this discussion with yourself, what are my needs? Where do I need to be? What is my goal here and what I'm trying to accomplish, whether it's to establish or expand businesses, to vet somebody for a deal, to look to hire somebody new to represent my company in a country, or whatever it is. How do I trust that who I'm relying on to vet that information is also trustworthy? And that's why having that ability to discern that, whether it's through people here in the States or other mechanisms of trust, maybe through other colleagues that have dealt with them and they have a track record, is super, super important here, because the worst thing you could do is get mixed up. And I've seen this happen numerous times, where incredibly polished, experienced people in different sectors internationally end up falling for scammers who claim to be this or they claim to be that. And then they offer up the information which leads to deals and different things happening. These people end up they lose tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, and they have to move forward with that. And has real implications. All what we're talking about here has real implications. So the technology piece, it can be really powerful in that sense of helping you vet and helping you understand, but it shouldn't be done in a vacuum. So
Yeah, Ondrej. So John touched on something I want to amplify a little bit, and with the audience and some risk management professionals out there, and that is the process of prioritizing which risks are important, which risks are less important. So I'll give you some examples of my experience. So early in my bureau career, there was rather informal risk prioritization process, and it was about mainly surveying. It was the process of surveying we would ask other law enforcement professionals, what do you think is important for this city to protect against? Is it organized crime? Is it gang violence? Is it drugs? Is it terrorism? And we would take the results of those surveys, basically rank them by which appeared more and which appeared to be. And we had this system, and it was work efficient because it wasn't very hard to do. We after 9/11, there was a move within the Bureau to get very, very detailed and specific and create mathematical formulas around this. And I was very much against it as an executive in the Bureau. I said, this is not, I just don't have faith that you can say this is a 4 and this is a 5. And as a result, the combination make a 4.6. And that's higher than the 4.5. And that's where we put the resources. It just didn't make sense to me. And the reason is the enemy gets a vote. We don't get to decide what our adversaries are going to do next. Sometimes we just don't see it over the horizon. But what I did find, and what converted me over time, was the process of how to think about risk and understanding that if you are consistent, then you will notice change over time. And that change over time is really the significant outcome and the worthwhile outcome of the risk assessment process. It's not necessarily deciding that your terrorism risk is more important than your gang risk. It's about understanding what's changing with your terrorism risk compared to what's changing with your gang risk. And that complete understanding is beneficial to a risk management professional. So I think what John touched on and what we're all struggling with is, where do we focus? And understanding change over time helps you focus.
Oh, this is great. Great point, Leo, because ultimately, like, even like leadership, we believe that the ultimate quality of us as individuals is ability to transform much faster than, for example, AI or machines that do exist today. And that's basically embrace the change in a process itself to the destiny. So, for example, in leadership, we don't believe, as you mentioned, the destiny is as important. The destiny is a manifestation of these transforming steps that we truly take forward, and the destiny is being created as a derivation or impact where we are. So I think that you really nailed the issue, perhaps in the logic, how we thinking about risk assessment process, how we really truly walking through it. If you're an executive today, and I have a privilege, to be a part of many of the leadership series and speak on the digital transformation risk, and you are an executive, it's so hard for executive to understand, just because the technology is such a jargon that we speak, and we use so many acronyms to executives to speak with a level of confidence that they don't understand, just because the technology is ultimately a black box to them. If you could summarize, Leo, perhaps, what do you see right now technologies in competition that do relate to geopolitical risk?
For me, what is most impactful and what is perhaps a lower probability is the idea that quantum computing will be able to break modern encryption, because that's the total. It will turn the world inside out. If someone can successfully and efficiently develop a quantum computing capacity that can be applied to break codes that we have used over the last 40 years, then I do think we are in a different world, not only going forward, but also looking back. And so that's where I think technological advantage will be most pronounced. Obviously, there's a race to accomplish those and to achieve those capabilities. Hopefully, we'll have systems in place before anyone who wants to do us harm can break our codes. But that to me would be number one. I think autonomous technologies that can be applied to simple weapons make the world a more dangerous place. So what we're seeing in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, where we can apply I was a tank officer. And so in the 1980s and 90s, tanks were applied in ways that are totally different today. We were not immune as tanks, but we were certainly not sitting ducks, as it appears that tanks are today. So, and that's the result of applying a few common technologies together. If you take a directed charge and you apply a video camera and a lightweight flying capability to it, you now have a anti-tank weapon that costs about $100. And when I was a tank officer, you needed another tank to have that same impact. So for me, number one is quantum computing and the threat to encryption. Number two is the combination of low-cost technologies to create tier one military capabilities that didn't exist 5 years ago. And that puts smaller groups, some groups that are not a threat to major militaries, those groups now have the ability to have the same impact as a tier one adversary, near peer adversary. So the US has to rethink some of the major investments it's made in major weapon systems, especially ground-based weapon systems, based on those two threats. Those, to me, those are the top two.
Mm. Would you see, for example, like that AI should be embraced by enterprises somehow, or it's still premature for enterprises leverage somehow artificial intelligence to geopolitical risk assessment?
No, I do. I think AI, it will be a game changer in the commercial sector in terms of transforming customer experience, eliminating repetitive, high-cost labor. It will change how enterprises view the human capital they need to perform certain tasks. It will change how enterprises deliver services to their customers and make decisions. And I do think it will have an impact on how the warfare is conducted. We're seeing signs of that now, where there are reports that there are completely autonomous weapon systems that make decisions on their own as to whether to engage or not engage. And so that's a pretty scary thought if you think about machine learning being able to distinguish between a lethal impact or a non-lethal impact. I think that's a threat. I don't think we're on the cusp of robots fighting robots, but I do think that the AI field, and there's a lot packed into AI. It's not just the generative AI we see with ChatGPT, but it's also the ability to do image and situational awareness faster than a human, especially in complex situations. So all of that wrapped together, yeah, I agree with you, Ondrej. I think we got to keep an eye on AI as well.
Can you mention the human importance in collection of intelligence and processing that intelligence? If you could perhaps summarize or give us a little bit of understanding, like what is that really intelligent report an enterprise gets on, let's say, geopolitical risk? Like, how would you describe the output? It's like for many of us, it's just maybe harder to grasp, like what would be really in that, like how that report is really constructed, what is included really for executives, for example, in that geopolitical risk assessment report?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is, Ondrej, you earlier referred to the language of risk and enterprise risk management, things like that, and it's daunting for a lot of folks and a lot of executives. And I'd say the same thing goes for a lot of former intelligence officers who go into the private sector to move forward, to figure out what's the lingo and how are they using it to describe what, because all the terms are common. Well, the terms aren't common, but the concepts are. And that gets to what you're talking about, which is, what are my requirements? Like when you talk about intelligence collection on a human basis, you have to have requirements. What do I want to know, and why do I want to know it? And that's incredibly important, whether you're talking about human sources or in technology. So if you've got some information scraping, web scraping kind of tool that is able to gather all the details for you, you can easily be overwhelmed. This happened in my first job in the private sector, where I was doing collection for this company. They had offices in about 100 different countries. And I had this tool that was supposed to help me find threats and all, and alert all these things to me. Well, I was getting more than like 2,000 text messages and emails a day. I mean, nobody can consume that much data, and a lot of it wasn't useful. So I'd say the first part of you, and one of the main parts to your question is, what do I care about? And that's where you direct the intelligence to collect on it. What's important to me? What's important to my company? And what do I need to understand? Usually it has to do with plans and intentions. Those are the most important things. The stuff that's going on a day-to-day basis, most of that stuff, it's either reported because of requirements that local governments have to report data or things like that, or you can read about it in the paper. The plans and intentions are some of the most important parts of it. Now you have to be careful here because you don't want to get sideways with the law, because there are restrictions as to things you can and cannot collect. But trying to understand, as Leo was saying, you can understand from reading media and understanding from people that have affiliations within sectors where things are heading, and that's just as that can help inform decisions because you understand maybe what contracts are going to be let, who's got a leading shot for this, where's technology moving, or where's this company that that I'm trying to do business with directing themselves, so I can position myself correctly to be somebody who could be a good partner for them. So on the human side, that's something. The other thing too is when you're going to be hiring somebody or working with somebody as a partner, like what are the real important things? How can I trust them? What's their background? Have they ever been involved in corrupt activity? Things like that. You want to be as specific as possible so that when you're doing the collection, you can make sure it's addressing the needs that you have. And again, this goes back to the resource management. If I'm going to be looking at Ondrej Krehel and I want to find out, hey, I want to do a check on this guy because we're going to do business with him. Leo and I want to hire him to our company. All right. We can do a huge scrub and it'll take tens of thousands of dollars and months to do, or we really only have one or two questions that we want answered and we want to be as specific as possible on that. Oftentimes that takes some training, that takes some experience, that takes time to sit with people who have experience in that to help you navigate it, because it's not intuitive for us. I think it's not intuitive for a lot of people at companies because they're so focused on creating the company, creating the technology, building it out, especially for startups. Those folks are not as comfortable or experienced in some of those kind of softer ways of softer sciences or whatever you want to call it. And so having somebody who can help them navigate that and be able to figure out what are my requirements, and then how do those change over time, because they do change, they do morph, as Leo was saying. This is a process, and you have to look at the needs of your company or whatever your entity are going to change from month to month, year to year. And then tracking that, understanding that, looking at it maybe across your sector is just as important, because there are cycles to these things, and understanding those and seeing those, stepping away from the tactical, from the day to day, to be able to step back and get that strategic perspective, and getting the strategic intelligence can give you that insight so that you see what's coming over the horizon and you can make smart decisions.
Mm. No, that's great. And I'm just always thinking that I don't believe the executives do have clear understanding, often in regions where they operate, and it's just really questionable why this intelligence report related to geopolitical, let's say, future situations, right, like to manifest themselves. Why is that something that's not engaged? It's almost like a human health, right? Engaging going forward, and it's somehow this geopolitical risk is, in my view, getting missed. Leo, I want to ask you.
Well, Ondrej, also
yes.
it's just it's the basic questions that are really hard too, right? It's not these complicated technological questions. It's like, where should I do business? Who should I do business with? I mean, it's very bit. I mean, some of the more basic questions are some of the hardest to answer, because they not only require people to give you the insights, because it's oftentimes the technology can get you access, but it's limit. You still have me here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Sorry
hear you
about
well,
that.
John.
Sorry. So sometimes it's limiting in that regard, but but finding the answers to those kind of questions sometimes can be the hardest part, and finding someone to trust who can help you burrow in on that, maybe who has a vested interest in your success as well, to help you find the right people is just as important. So I'm sorry for interrupting you. So
No, this is great addition. It's remind me, like in artificial intelligence, we study climbing hill algorithm called hill climbing algorithm. And it's basically, you want to go to AI, ask them, how can anybody be president in 10 years, right? A computer dies. But like you said, like it can make these decisions like, or how do I become billionaire in a year, right? And it's something that's like in a game theory, we have a finite and infinite games, right? So how do you play infinite game with a finite ends? Like how many finite ends do you need to have to win an infinite game? And ultimately, we don't have an answer. Like you said, it's a simple question, and we just can't make these rational decisions that would truly move forward. We just don't know how to do that very well. And if you look at the humankind, it's like that's geopolitical is one of those where perhaps it's just simple question, don't have the answer. Leo, I would like to connect back to what you mentioned before, and that is like how someone, for example, as an executive, you work at an enterprise. So now we understand geopolitics, connected technology, good and bad, and ugly in between. How someone should think about what are the risks that perhaps need to mitigate from the leveraging technology in geopolitical risk, right? So it doesn't give me actual superiority, right? Not being superior, but truly as an enterprise, I should probably think about this mitigation and technology risks.
Well, yeah, I mean, most larger enterprises have dedicated risk management professionals that apply risk management frameworks, and those frameworks are about understanding the assets that you have, what needs to be protected, understanding the risks against those assets, and then applying some type of mitigation, whether it's accepting the risk or eliminating the risk or reducing it below a risk tolerance level. And those are all brought together with an improvement process. So let's take it in the framework of a risk framework, so that we have a structured way to think about it. So the question is, where does technology fit into that? Technology fits into every single part of that. If technology can help you figure out what assets you have. You could do a network scan and figure out what asset, at least a simple network scan will tell you what assets you have on your network and what may or may not be valuable and what may or may not need to be protected. Similarly, technologies can tell you may have an asset that's in a server closet behind an unlocked door, and it's not a technology solution. You just need to apply a mechanical lock. So there are different places for technology to be applied, but they certainly apply in each of the different steps within a risk management framework. I think companies have to continually assess their risk mitigation assets and procedures and personnel. And in that, they have to continually assess what technologies they're using, whether it's video cameras, something simple or as common as a video camera, or something as sophisticated as an insider threat program that uses language analysis to understand whether someone's becoming closer to angry enough to have a violent reaction to a company decision. So just to round it all up, within the risk mitigation framework, technology plays a role in every step. And within the actual mitigation process, companies need to understand and constantly evaluate and constantly improve. Risk mitigation is not a one and done action. It is a continuous process. It is something that has to be invested in, studied. It needs full board support. It needs full executive support. And the last thing I'll say is that mitigating risk, whether it's cyber or other risks, has to be part of the culture. You can't just have a team that does it. If it's only the responsibility of a few people in the company, it won't be real. And I'll give you an example. I traveled to a country that's very famous for cybersecurity. They have a very robust cybersecurity intellectual property process, and they've been successful around the world in developing solutions. And I visited that country to find out what it is that country has that we don't have or that we could do better. And I realized after a short time, and I spent a lot of time with their engineers and with their entrepreneurs, I realized they're no smarter than we are. Certainly, they don't have more resources than we do. They don't have any better ideas than we do. The reason why they do security better is because everybody's invested in security. Unfortunately, in that country, they face threats from all directions, and everyone feels like they are part of everybody else's security posture. And so while executives set the tone, it's really about having a security culture and having everyone invested in the company's security.
I always truly enjoy, like, when you look at the extreme ownership, like how someone actually, the company takes an extreme ownership and owns the situation, makes the decisions, makes everybody's priority and move forward. It's truly embraced culturally at some of the enterprises, but I cannot agree with you more, Leo, that the culture is strategy for breakfast. It's just the way it is. John, going back to you is, like, always had a friends and they try to fool me, right? They always give me wrong intelligence, wrong information. I'm trying to not the way I really need to be, and then they made fun of me. So now imagine now being a CEO at enterprise, right? Like, so how do you deal with the risk, or how do you mitigate the risk from, let's say, these misleading intelligence reports, right? So often financial institutions go through this stock issues, right? Like on the financial market, we've seen it when, oh, wait, this company is not doing well, like geopolitically, this is what's going to happen. Bomb, stock goes down, right? So we've seen so many examples of this rumor. People act on rumor, and the market is acting on rumor, especially in financial, when it comes to publicly traded company and enterprise. So how the executives, or is there a way truly to mitigate on enterprises these misleading intelligence collections about the companies with the connection to geopolitical risk?
Yeah, I mean, you get to the core of everything right there, Ondrej, which is trust. Can I trust the information that I'm getting is good, that that I'm going to make decisions based upon it? How can I validate it? And I think that's where it becomes important. I mean, that's how it is in the intelligence community. Any data, any information, any intelligence that's collected has to be validated. It has to be tested. It has to be known to be as correct as it possibly can, without political leanings to it, in order to allow decision makers to make the right decisions for policy. And so and the same thing holds true for companies. If the data that I'm getting is incorrect, if I can't trust the people telling me what it is that they're telling me, if it's corrupted, it's coming from bad, whatever. And I think that's when you insist that whatever process you have in place has some way to validate the information that it's tested, just doesn't come from one source. That any internal biases are recognized, and maybe having somebody that can be able to help you do that. We all have our own biases, right? So I'm a CEO of a company and I really, really want to buy company ABC, right? Really want to buy it. And the information I'm getting isn't always the best, but I could put a spin on it where, okay, it's doable. You need to have somebody who can be able to, kind of talk you off the ledge when you're making those decisions. So I think understanding, who the big players are, not believing the fool's gold salesman who's going to tell you, I've got the best, coolest tool that can do everything. Nobody else can do this thing out there. I can get you everything you need without a problem for super cheap. Usually, if it's too good to believe, it's not true. And then similarly, when you're looking at what's going on in other countries, and you're looking at trends that are happening over there. I mean, there are sources out there that you can reach out to, that think tanks and things like that. But you want to be able to trust whoever it is you're dealing with. And I think having somebody you can lean on, or a company or that can validate or help you validate the sources of information. And then look, time will prove. And time shows, if as you start having these kind of you'll put benchmarks in place, and you'll have a path, have a collection of information. If it just isn't showing up truthfully, or it's partially truthful over time, then you kind of know. And what I always find is anyone who makes excuses, who causes delays, who gives me false dates from which they can get stuff, or they say they can do it for this much and it usually comes tenfold over, is probably not somebody trustworthy for what it is that I need to do. Somebody who claims to be from whatever agency and can get you whatever it is they need, and then they need to go to other people to get the information. Again, you may want to think twice about something like that. It's important. It's important to be discerning when you do these things. And again, people and sources and companies have shelf lives as well. And so oftentimes what I've seen is most of the companies that provide these kinds of services or individuals, they're relying on one person, maybe two, to be able to provide the access that they need to provide them with the insights from human sources. If they lose that person, if that person, we all get older, and our contacts age out and people change. I mean, that's happened. So having the ability to really be aware of that and then shift and change as you need to, as you move along, is really key. So
Yeah. There was a part of a question that has been actually asked in a Q&A forum. In a Q&A, I see the question someone is asking, how did you make your career, and what would be your suggestion, for example, for graduates at enterprise risk management program, how they should perceive, for example, looking at an internship or career opportunities? If you can give any advice for our future leaders in enterprise risk management, how they should position yourself. Perhaps you start with you, Leo, and then John.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I have experienced and try to distill it into advice. I've always taken the job nobody wanted. And I've done that because I calculated that it would give me experience and skills that I would not otherwise be able to obtain. When I transitioned from civilian life, for example, entering into the U.S. military is a transformative event. It's not something for everybody, but it was something I needed in order to go from being a kid from Queens to being a professional, and it was worth the effort. So I took that job. It's not a job many people want. It's a tough job. I took later jobs that nobody wanted and made something out of them. So my advice to folks is balance title and salary against what you can really achieve by taking on a challenge that doesn't look as attractive as something shiny and something that pays more than your colleagues get paid. That isn't always the best way to get the long-term best career. And lastly, if you really should, and it's kind of a cliche, but it is true. If you're not really interested and don't really believe in what you're doing, then maybe you should do something different, because it's hard to be good at something you don't like doing. So I would put those two together. Take the jobs nobody wants if they teach you skills that you can't get anywhere else, and do what you like to do, because it's something that in the long run you will ultimately become very good at it. So that's how I would wrap it up.
John, next to you.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Leo said. I mean, I usually go into something and the whole thing I tell young people and my kids even is, don't ask why, ask like, why not? Why shouldn't I apply to CIA? Why shouldn't I try these opportunities? A lot of times people just can't, they don't think, oh, they wouldn't want me, they wouldn't be interested in me. And I think I was surprised myself. I mean, I went into a situation where I really didn't have any skills. I went to, undergrad, I studied history, and I spoke a little bit of Spanish, but really not a lot. And I had one experience overseas, and I applied on a whim, and they were willing to, I guess they saw something that they liked because the process kept moving along. What I found really enticing about the agency and the other places I applied to, because I applied to a number of government agencies, was the mission and the importance of that to me. And that really kept my energy and kept my interest throughout the 30 years that I worked, and did what I did. Because not every job you're going to have a great day. You're not going to every day be super excited to get out of bed and jump out and go, this is going to be the greatest day ever. Because you're going to have those days, but you're also going to have those days where, God, I just want to sleep in, or I just don't want to do this anymore, or you're killing me here, right? And so having that sense of purpose and mission, and understanding that what you're doing, whatever it is you're doing, is going to have an impact, a bigger impact than just on yourself. Well, maybe it's for your family, maybe it's for, in society, you're working with, special needs children, or maybe you're working, on getting intelligence to policymakers, or you are one of the policymakers. Whatever it is, wherever you're going, that it has that mission. And I think there's so much out there where it has mission. You also want to do something that allows you to interact as much as possible with people. There's this, I think because of COVID, we have this feeling that, oh, I'm just going to work remotely from home. It's a dream, and I get a great salary, and I never have to, deal with anybody. And that doesn't really make it fun, and that doesn't really make it worth anything. I think back on my career, there were a lot of jerks I worked with, but lots of great people and lots of unbelievable experiences, not related to the job, that I would never in my life have had I not chosen this path. And when I wanted to stay home and watch, reruns of Seinfeld, instead I decided to go out with whoever it was and do something different and or take a chance and take a step forward. The other thing Leo said, I think, is really important: looking to enhance your skills constantly. Look for employers that will train you and take advantage of every single opportunity to get training and new skills, because especially now with how fast things are moving, especially if you're in tech, if you don't understand AI, if you don't understand machine learning, you don't have to be you don't have to be a programmer, but if you don't understand it or how to understand to use it, you're going to get passed by. And that's something I know, when I first got to New York, they were talking about autonomous vehicles and how they're going to move to trucks. And 60%, I believe, 60 or 70% of all men in the United States work in transportation. And so the concern there from a broader policy standpoint was, once we get all these autonomous vehicles, what are we going to do with all these people? They're going to put all these people out, these drivers and truck drivers, out of work. Then what do we do? So making sure you have those skill sets that will make you valuable and a commodity, essentially, moving forward. It's we're beyond the days where you're going to have one job for the rest of your life. But I would say, if anybody's thinking about the jobs in national security, in the FBI, CIA, NSA, State Department, any of the agencies, tremendous opportunities. They really, really need good people who are committed, who are dedicated, who care about their country and want to help and want to learn and have energy. It's a great time for that. And the challenges are just getting more complicated, and they require more creativity, which really, I think, gets. I mean, that's what I loved about what I did. Every day you went to the job being creative about what it is you're doing. And so I would encourage people to do that and reach out if there's any interest on your end. So back to you, Ondrej.
So, closure statement. Like, if you want to say like one or two sentences, anybody, about how to think about enterprises and connection to geopolitical risk, what comes to your mind? What would you tell the CEOs and enterprises in your closing statement, please? Leo, let's start with you.
Okay, well, people ask me what's my real job. So we have a big employee base. I have, a global company. And when I think about what my real job is, I think about my job is to make it safe for people to tell me the truth. And as you go out as a risk management professional, you have to have a culture where people can tell you what the real situation is. Because if you don't have an understanding of the problem, you certainly won't know how to solve it. So create a culture around yourself about integrity and treating people fairly, and you will be successful in risk management.
Thank you. John, passing to you.
I'd just say, don't wait. We have a tendency, everyone has a tendency to wait. Don't wait. So when it comes to trying to understand risk, acting on risk, deciding what you want to do, whatever it is, don't wait. Doesn't get better with time. Bad news doesn't get better, but also opportunities don't necessarily come back again. So take advantage of opportunities, take advantage of where you are now. You're at Columbia, really, what a phenomenal opportunity. Take advantage of everything you have around you. Act, because before you know it, that opportunity is going to end and you're going to be moving somewhere else. And then I'd say too, for planning for yourself and making sure that your company, yourself, your family are safe, and what to do with all these risks. Again, act and make sure you understand how to move forward on that. So.
No, thank you, John. And for me, it was always the self-awareness, how we struggle to be self-aware of what the risk really is and how our ego can, in our way, what we know, the wisdom is coming from. And I recall when I used to contract, and one of the guys at SEC told me is that the Department of Trade is full of closed companies and startups. It's just, and not just because of the bad ideas, it's just the self-awareness that was missing in the action. I truly would like to thank you for today's quest and exploration of connection of technology and superiority in technology and geopolitical risk. It's a privilege and honor to be around you, Leo and John. And one of the qualities I never shine is to ask for help. So thank you for exploring with me and with our audience the geopolitical risk and what we know today. And thank you, great Columbia University, to be part of such a distinguished community and enterprise risk management program. Thank you both, and wishing everybody wonderful, safe, and geopolitically sounded rest of the evening. Bye.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Ondrej.